Anyhow,
Let's
sorry.
start this regular council work session on January 24th. Roll call, please. Already have it, we can move on.
Yes, we will jump into
We're all here.
general fund
Let's just-
library,
That's
kind
right.
of jump in. Get into the other accounts.
Are these in the same order as our packet here on the?
I apologize for not making the first one, the first budget meeting, so I'm not entirely sure how we want to go through this. I'll just hit my line items, kind of talk about the proposed changes for this year. Please feel free to ask me questions at any point. Salaries are just nothing typical outside of the normal, whatever the council wants to do for standard cost of living increases. We were looking at combining the travel, training, education line. One of our major conferences, a national conference, is within driving distance, where we don't have to, in contrast, we don't have to stay at a hotel for our state conference. So we're looking at going to that national conference. It's an exceptional conference worth the drive. So we were looking for a little bit extra to drive. Building maintenance is primarily just estimates on how the building has been doing, going up a little bit, just as it gets older.
No,
It's, yeah, in the packets, I believe it's farther back. There's a lot of little ups and downs. Adam and I debated the utilities. We tend to be very front loaded on a lot of our costs in the year, including our utilities. The building doesn't handle heat well, so we spend quite a bit trying to cool it down, not so much trying to heat it. So go either way. I think I proposed a small increase. Adam suggested a little bit higher based on inflation. I'm not sure where that'll end up. But I'm not going to argue with that number. Our janitorial expenses, we had to hire a new janitor, which the lowest cost we could find is an increase. We're still considerably lower than we were a few years back. About 5 years ago, we were using some of the larger corporations and we're spending $5,000 to $6,000 per year. So we're still considerably lower than that. We looked at dropping our advertising and legal just because we haven't been spending as much on that. Technology services, we're looking at increasing that a little bit just to deal with the inflation on technology. We look to replace several machines every year and what we've been budgeting just isn't cutting it. You guys look confused, so I'm okay.
Still trying to find.
I found it.
Sorry.
Under our contracts, we're dropping that. Part of our circulation cataloging system is based off of how many material items we have. That's been dropping as things like magazines are less used. Our DVD collection is less used. We make room more for gathering. Unfortunately, not this year or the past year, but in general, we've been making more room. So as that total collection size has dropped in physical quantities, the actual contracts have been dropping as well, the contract fees for that. Office supplies, again, just based off of what we have been seeing over the last couple of years in terms of what our costs are, we just are estimating to drop that. Under postage and shipping, we have the state's shipping service now for interlibrary loans, shipping between libraries, so we don't have to spend as much. They cautioned us against dropping that, so we dropped it some last year and dropping it more this year, just because we don't send as much by postage as we used to. I know we're looking at having some of our miscellaneous supplies, which is primarily program supplies, being offset more by fundraising this year. So while that doesn't change, I think we were looking at offsetting that by additional income. Under office equipment, we were looking at increasing that just because we had to sign a new lease for our copier and printer. And that just is that's my estimate for what it'll cost. We don't have any determined figures for that. A lot of it's based on use, so I just don't know. And then we were looking at dropping the collections. Again, we are seeing less of our efforts towards the collection itself. So we had jumped the collection up to 26,000, probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, because it was a certain ranking within the state accreditation, and they stopped doing that. And so we don't necessarily need to keep that amount anymore. So overall, the total at the bottom of this has an increase in expenses of $5,638. According to my figures, in combination with additional fundraising, is going to drop our request from the city in terms of income by a decent bit. I would say probably, it depends on how much we look at from fundraising, how much that's been offset, but it should be a couple, $2,000-3,000 at least off of our direct general fund request. I'm just trying to think what the other items are in the highlight.
The cleaning expense,
Yeah,
you're looking like quite a bit of increase there.
we just had to, we tried to find somebody who would clean the building. Prior administration and finance was dead set on paying not over a certain rate, and we could not find anybody who was willing to do that. I still think that our current cleaner that we have now for this rate is kind of being nice to us and cleaning it for that rate.
That dusting, vacuuming,
Vacuuming, mopping, windows, restrooms, twice a week for 2 hours each. When I started 15 years ago, we actually were about 50% higher in how often the library was cleaned. They came in 3 times a week for 2 hours each. They were a staff member, so we were paying insurance and FICA, IPERS on them as well for additional cleaning. They were
that's
actually
kind of getting at, is there a chance staff can do that? Some of them.
not without additional staff. I mean, we've among city staff, we've talked about having a janitor for a long time among the different facilities, Cubby Park, Town Hall. I mean, an offshoot of Works or Separate or something of that sort. I've done it before. It's not honestly 4 hours a week. You can't get it all done. There's a lot of floor.
Okay.
That might be something we look at, not in this budget, but, we have cleaners we pay to clean everything else, we ought to add all that up and see what we're actually spending on our janitorial costs and see if, that's not something.
Not this budget, but maybe in a year or two.
I know we were discussing, and this is more like, just tossing out ideas type of thing, is I know we were looking for additional people for parks, for public works, and
Garbage
if
pickup.
if part of that
Cleanup.
was janitorial as part of their duties, maybe
Yeah.
grounds work as well. That might save us, or that might offshoot or offset from expenditures that we're already paying.
Okay, all right, Nick. Thank you.
I do have a question. So with COVID over the last couple of years, we closed the library for,
It was 7 months.
7 months?
We were closed. That was March through December of 2020.
Oh, and it's been fully open since then?
Yeah,
Oh,
we had
okay.
some shifted hours just for staffing and the way people were using it. We put more staffing onto Friday night instead of on Sunday, but otherwise we asked for people to wear masks, but otherwise we're completely normal right now.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nick.
Nick, you know, this is a question for me, just so council remembers, you know, I guess, where are we at with the steps?
We need to get a quote for those still. I need to talk Matt now that I'm back and get somebody to come out and look at them. I left some messages with a couple contractors and just haven't.
And that is not in this budget. I know
Correct.
it's something that you and I contemplated.
There are options for paying for that. There are matching grants to the community foundation that we could look at in the fall, as well as savings that the library already has set aside. So I'm not too concerned. That I think the big question with that right now is just finding somebody who's available.
I'm not convinced the steps should be a full-on library liability. It's public sidewalk also.
Well, I think the biggest problem is the steps that lead directly from the sidewalk up to the library. I
That
would
would
say.
be library in my mind. Down would be.
Yeah, the part where the handrails are getting a little funky, that's street to sidewalk. So, I mean, that would be something else, but that's just a handrail primarily too. Depends on how much we want to break off, when we take a look at that. There has been some washout underneath those. I know Matt's put some dirt underneath them. I don't think there's very good footing underneath. Yeah, they just wash under.
Yeah.
So what do we have for libraries staff? 2 full-time or 3?
We have 3 full-time, including me doing IT. So that includes me. So we had
Oh, including.
2 full-time up until 2014. And I kept getting pulled away to do cable, to do technical support. And so I brought to our prior administrator the idea of using our cable funds to do technical support, since I was being pulled away, to have somebody else do more of the library work, to backfill what I was not able to do. So that's when we brought up to 3 full-time. I'm paid partially out of the cable budget for doing the technical stuff.
Okay, my next question is, means it's going more the technology route. That takes up more of your time, right?
It depends on the week, depends on what's going on. I mean, it really just depends. Yeah, some weeks are bad, some weeks are fine,
So the walk-ins pretty much back to where it was pre-COVID?
You mean the library traffic?
Yeah, the library traffic.
No, our circulation, like our materials usage is slightly less, but getting back up there. Our walk-in is much lower because we don't have the group after school. I don't know why. I think people are just avoiding it. We used to have a ton of people come in to the library, especially after school. We'll have a few right now, but we just don't have that large crowd.
What age group was that mainly came in?
Anywhere. It was anything from elementary on up to through middle school typically. It depended on babysitting situations where the middle schoolers were going, how many kids they were watching. So that just.
So that didn't come, the kids?
Not yet.
Huh. That surprised me.
That could be that
with the COVID, more parents are now working from home, so they don't need the library.
That could
for
be.
Daycare, so the kids just automatically come home.
It's partially because I haven't started after school programming.
There's that too. We did just shift back. I'm sorry, I'm like completely drunk. I talk a lot. We did shift some of our programming back to Zoom primarily because they were targeting age groups that are not able to be vaccinated. Story times, people weren't coming in with their kids because they didn't want to expose the kids. So we thought we'd catch more people just by doing it online, not because we wanted to, just thought we'd hit a bigger crowd.
Okay,
Thanks, Nick.
good questions. Thank you. Hotel motel. You have 'em?
Yes. I will jump into, I guess, Civic Center first. That's what's in line in order of your expenses. I guess last year, we were looking at this fiscal year, we were at basically minus 10,000 in terms of it revenue for expenses. What I am proposing today, and we'll have to pass a policy, is for that Civic Center to be on its own, not be a part of specifically the general fund. And so what is not spent in this current budget would go in the savings for the town hall / Civic Center. So right now, if we do this proposal of, we go back to maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we used to tax the $13 or 13 cents on the town hall. And I think Gordon changed it maybe a year or two ago, only because he felt like there was a strong savings in there. In my opinion, 40,000 when you're talking a historic preservation building is not going to go that far. If we get the projected 20,000 in revenue, we're projecting about anywhere between 16 and 19,000 would be spent in expenses. So maybe only 2,000 to 3,000 would go in savings. But I guess it's worth a start to have it be on its own and to have some sort of either a balance statement or some sort of savings for a future project. At some point, it's gonna need a new roof or whatnot. So biggest expenses are utilities, and that is shared between the park and rec department and on its own. This park and rec department's in, 1/3, 2/3 of the time, and the other 1/3, or rather 1/2, however we have it calculated, is in here on the Civic Center fund. I do have window painting or window cleaning and painting in there. If it gets done, then I don't know if it'll be that 6,000, but if it's not as high as that 6,000, it'll go in the savings for a future renovation to town hall.
Do you know when the last time windows were replaced?
Well, the
Anybody?
original, pretty sure they're original.
When?
Those single
Never.
pane wood windows. I don't know when they've been painted.
I thought we did something.
Oh, we put a roof on it a while back.
You painted it. didn't
I
you?
painted it in
Oh, just
15,
paint
like,
it?
just the eave and the dormers, I think.
So we haven't done
And that
anything.
didn't last
from
long.
Put the doors in about 15 years ago. Did some remodeling on the inside.
We'll talk about the total levy as a whole later. But there were some changes when I updated our debt. What we're paying off for debt, and I thought it'd be $20 for $200,000. Well, our debt's not gonna be quite as high as I thought. So essentially, what it would cost a homeowner of a $200,000 home would be $2.19 for this bump in the Civic Center. Everything else kind of equals out. So last time we met, things weren't equaling out in terms of revenues and expenses when it comes to the tax levy wise. But that's what I would anticipate this bump would be about $2.19 a year for a household at $200,000.
So,
Theirs go up $20.
so utilities to me
Yep.
look rather high, but anyhow, it's understandable now that I know. So isn't there any grants out there that, being that's a historic building, that we could like apply for like insulation in the attic? I've been in that attic and it's rather cold in the winter. So I'm pretty sure.
It's not
Not
on the
much
historic
insulation.
register, yeah.
Huh?
That building's not on the historic register. Not yet.
It's not?
No. It's gonna take a little work.
We'll have to apply. I think, and then there are other grants and tax credits that we could do. I think the first step is get that certified local government status, hopefully in the next year. I haven't worked with Historic Preservation
Oh, I thought
Commission
we
yet
were.
at this point.
Oh.
And then it would be, yeah, you could get, one of their strategic goals was to have town hall be on the registry. And maybe there's some things Alliant could do as well. Or Alliant, whoever we have, they may have some credits there that I can ask around about. So it's not a bad guess either. Utilities was just a projection shoot. I did 25% across the board on utilities for inflation. Based on some of the reports I've read, it's about 43% for utilities, but we've already been hitting some of that already. So that's kind of where I just kind of chalked it up in the middle, 25%. It's possible we're high. And if we are high, it'll go in the town hall savings if I am high.
So if we're not using the town hall, nobody's got it booked. What do we? I mean, Melissa's in there during the day. So we like at 68 with the thermostat, 65.
Might be. It's not a heat wave in there, I'm pretty sure.
It's not a heat wave in there.
Not that warm.
No, I'm sure it's not. Single
Sure,
pane
off,
windows.
Probably has a little electric heater in there, probably.
Yeah,
They might, I would say.
I'm just saying, the overall cost for Windows and update would be enormous. I know that, but utility wise in the long run,
Well, if we're gonna get new windows, we'd want to get them before we get on the registry. Because that's one thing, is they will be picky on the windows. What you do inside and, you know, whether you do solar on the roofs or not, they tend to not be as picky about. But windows in the exterior tends to be what.
but I thought as long as they were, I thought you could do like double pane and they didn't have to be the wood frame anymore. They had to be the same style. Or the,
I don't think they may have to be true divided lights, what it's called. Or it's still individual panes. I don't think you can do the fake pane in between the glass.
oh,
I
really?
mean, the fake mutton bars in a historic building.
I didn't know that. All right,
But there's other
Yeah.
ways. It might have to be a real wood window too,
oh, wow.
or it can be a. It has to look real.
Well, I know it
Has to
has
look-
to look real, but I thought,
Sometimes
I don't
it's
know
the
the rules.
material too. They want the same material or very similar. And that just depends on what, that's subjective. Sometimes, you know, you may work with an administrator that is more flexible. Sometimes there's ones that's just a little bit lenient. So I think if we're gonna change windows, we should do it before we put it on the registry, just to be safe. So.
It's still not gonna be cheap.
No, those are big windows.
no,
You're talking 100 grand, 80 grand.
It's $800 a window, probably. No.
All right, what else we got?
Moving the hotel motel, proposing 50% goes to community development group. If we do get that second hotel in, that would increase CDG's funding as well as the city's, so it should create an incentive for them to promote tourism. It'll help their revenue out, it'll help ours. As it stands right now, as what's being proposed, would create a $5,000 transfer or 25% of hotel motel going into Heritage Square Park, and then establishes a saving of 25% for hotel motel. We'll need to pass a policy on that, but that's at least what is proposed in here. If there's a bad year, hotel motel wise, we will have to use some general fund money to help CDG because we have that $10,000 promise. But anywhere between 18 to 20,000 is what we expect to get next year. So maybe 1,000 or 2 we'll have to support them off general fund. The rest can be done off a hotel motel.
So this is just based on the one motel, right? Hotel.
Correct.
18,000.
Correct.
So if we get the other one, how soon does that fund?
It's usually 6 months behind. Yeah. I can tell you, at least what we got in Garner, same hotel size as the one that we currently have in probably in West Branch, but it was newer facility, higher rent. We got about 54,000 a year in that. So if we were on that model in West Branch, 27,000 would go to CDG. 13,000 would go towards set aside for Heritage Square, and another 13,000 would go in the savings.
So would we cut out the 10,000 that we, would that be part of the 10,000 that we would be giving CDG then?
Correct.
Cut that out of the
Correct.
general fund.
Correct.
Okay.
To make us stay afloat, you know, for a year or two, they're really not getting a benefit CDG. But if we get a second hotel, it'll be a huge benefit to them. Go into road use. Couple things I want you to know before Matt talks. We did start the year about 120,000 over in this budget, and we broke it down to about 7,000 over budget. Matt and I will talk probably a little bit more of what we did to make that work. But a couple things I want you guys to kind of be aware of. Once we do this streets capital improvement plan this summer, I do want some sort of calculation as to what do we expect to pay annual maintenance wise, and what are we getting revenue wise to pay for our streets. And I guess my point is this, I've got some financial concerns with how much R1, you know, in 5 to 10 years that we should do. I think what's set now is fine. I don't think we change that at this point. But I'd like to run the numbers. I'm not for certain that I'm convinced that when we get a new house, we get enough in property taxes to pay for the wide roads. So just something I want to run the numbers on. I could be wrong, but just something for you guys to think about. Again, I don't want to stress that too much because I could be wrong, but just want you guys to be aware of, we may have to rethink how we should grow with the Iowa City pressure. I'll let you go ahead, Matt.
So, as Adam said, we started out pretty high over. We've been running in the road use fund over budget for a while in order to do the projects that we bring every year. So in order to get that down, we did have to cut out the concrete at the shop. 20,000 in seal coat work, crack sealing. There was some maintenance to our shop that we were gonna do, that we cut that out. We just made some fairly big cuts to that stuff so that we could get that back down to where they're fairly even there. Those are the two big ones. So utilities and fuel were big ones that we looked at. Everything's going up in the utilities, everything's going up in fuel. Equipment repairs, we're just looking at previous years of where we're at and bringing stuff to match that. Our salt use and sand has gone up with more roads, more area to work on. Which is the same with our plows, cutting edges, everything else. The more roads you have, the more plowing you have to do and everything else. So when we get down to projects, the main projects we had for this year was that patch on Elephant Street, the north end, about 200 foot in. There's a sewer manhole. So that's gonna be a road project. So it's out of road use tax and it's a sewer project. So that's gonna cover, it's gonna come out of both of those. The sewer fund will cover all the work with the pipe and the manhole. And the street patch will be done out of road use. So that's what that patch is there. It's a decent sized patch. It'll basically be curb to curb, about 35 foot long, 40 foot long, something like that. The other one we're looking at, since it was brought up earlier, is straightening out that Greenview connection, removing those trees. And basically that would just be us going in, removing everything, digging it out 6 inches, putting in rock, putting seal coat over it. And that would be what we'd have. There'd be signage to mark the end of the street as is, and that's basically it. If we want to go back in and do anything more like giving property to the neighbors or any of that, that's not figured into this. It's just, this is getting rid of that grass in the middle and making a straight shot through there.
I got a question about that.
Sure.
So if you do that, then you have to extend all the driveways to the road, correct?
I mean, doing it this way with a $5,000 cost on it, that isn't what we had planned. It's just,
You're just gonna make that a whole big solid.
yeah. I mean, if
Oh,
this is what we have the money for, so if you want to do something more, we have to.
no, I was thinking you green in,
We
I don't
can.
really care how it's done. And it's not a high priority. Is that really a high priority for next?
It's a small project that we could do within our budget, so that's. I mean, if you want to go farther with it, we can, but again,
I don't
it's,
think we need the driveways. That, to me, but 3 or 4 more swipes with a plow, about pretty much all it is when you go in there. And some of those driveways would almost
It's
go right in front of
triple
somebody
the
else's
work
property.
to do the driveways would be 3 or
Oh
4
my God,
times the
yeah,
amount of work.
Yeah. And that part of the circle is fine. Why wouldn't we just dig out the dirt that's in there? Like you say, rock the whole thing, chip and seal it, and it's done until we get to a point where Greenview ever would get resurfaced. To deal with it all then.
I'm fine with that.
all right. Let's see, the other things we had was, so we are not replacing any vehicles this year just because of how the set aside falls, or our equipment replacement. So we're going to put aside, I think, 10,000 out of each budget. And then we're going to take the other 20 and put it towards the Oshkosh. That truck is probably something we're going to keep around for a long time. The frame on it's starting to get rusted out in the back and starting to get quite a bit of rust all through it. It's basically just a big sander, so it holds a lot of sand under it. We wash all the trucks, every time we plow and spreads salt sand, but it just needs some work done to it. So that's what that's for. We're gonna fix all the rust on it, basically sandblasted, have it repainted, take care of all the framework, and hopefully make that truck last another 15 years. We really only put about 90 hours on it a year, so it's not like it gets a ton of road time. It only goes out when we plow. We don't have a use for it besides that, so, I mean, it's useful for plowing, but everything else, it's not really useful for, so.
How many trucks do we have that we use for plowing?
We have five,
Including the Oscar?
yes,
And how many guys go out and plow?
5.
So all the trucks go out at the same time?
We all have a section of town that we plow. If we get done with a section and there's something that's left, we go and hit that.
I've advocated for a long time to get rid of that Oshkosh, and it just seems like this year, before you even took it out on the road, you had to take it over and have a bunch of work done to it because you wouldn't even pass inspection, and now we're looking at spending a lot more money on it. Just seems like this truck is getting to the point where it's old enough that it's just gonna be a continually asking for money. So if this truck is only used for the wing, that seems like that's really about all that truck's good for, and plowing the main streets, can we not put a wing on that other single axle truck, or is that too much?
You can, yeah. Yeah,
I guess I just can't see, keep throwing money at this truck that really sits almost all year
well,
long.
honestly,
It's
both our
10
dump
10
trucks
snow.
do.
What's that?
The Sterling sits in the summer too, and that's because we don't really have a use for our dump trucks. I mean, I personally like the 550s. We get way more use out of them, but everybody thinks we need dump trucks, so we have dump trucks.
The only thing is if we got a bunch of snow in a hurry and a bunch of drifting, them 550s, if there's 18 inches of snow down Cedar Johnson Road, the 550s ain't doing that.
And so my point to that is that happens maybe twice in 10 years. We've got plenty of contractors in this town that if that ever happens, it's a phone call away. And they've got the equipment to come out and blow it open in a hurry.
I would say, I would beg to differ, because those contractors have snow accounts that pay them every winter, so that's gonna be where the priority is.
Yeah, counties don't get out and open up the roads the exact same day that they're filled in either, so they might be a day. That's really probably the only road that's really bad,
Cedar Johnson.
Cedar Johnson Road.
Yeah.
It's, everything else in town is kind of blocked by
It's
the
that
town.
drift, that big drift.
So now we have another way to get out of that area without having to go down Cedar Johnson Road. We can go down through town.
Yeah, a couple.
Extension.
Couple ways. It doesn't drift other than from Prairie View south is where we get to.
So the flip side is we got 5 guys that plow. You want to remove a truck, all right? So we know a new one's gonna cost 80 grand to 100 grand. What them new 550s cost by the time they're outfitted. Or we can put $10,000 into the Oshkosh and it'll last maybe another 15 years.
That was my thinking on it. I'm right there with you. I don't think we should have the Oshkosh myself, but we already have it and I don't want another dump truck. Like, I don't want to have to put that in my rotation. I'd rather put the money into maintaining this one and keep it for another 15 years. Because it is cheaper, I think, at this point to maintain that than to go and get another dump truck or I mean, the 550s they're about 74 by the time we have them totally done.
That was before the new truck where they're getting.
Yeah,
I
and it,
just seen a 2013 4-wheel drive. They wanted $24,000.
Yeah. the one we got this year though, it came in right at 74 is what it. But yeah, they're gonna go up significantly.
So on the point of that is, then we've got 2 trucks right now that we use for snow plowing that sit almost most of the year. So we don't have to buy a new truck to sit all year long. We could buy a good used truck that's gonna sit in the shop just for plowing snow for that 5th truck. It doesn't take all that maintenance.
But if we already have a good used truck, then why go buy
the
another good
Oshkosh
truck?
is- What's it gonna cost you every year? 10 grand? We wouldn't even spend that much.
I mean,
would
the
we?
money we put into it last year was replacing all the air tanks on it, which those are the original ones, so that's a 2,000. I mean, so it's 20 years old.
Older than that.
It might, it's a 99. It's either 99 or 2000. So you're looking at 22 years old. So we just replaced the tanks. Hydraulic lines we replace all the time on everything. They wear and they break. So, but yes, that's my thinking on it, is that we already have that truck. It's already got a wing on it. It's heavy. It's 4-wheel drive. That was why I'm okay with fixing it up and keeping it and maintaining it. But it sits. Like it's too heavy to haul anything.
The other point would be is, if you got another 550, a used one for plowing snow, you can cover a lot more ground with one of those than with that Oshkosh. So then it saves you labor time. So, I mean, there's a payoff there that,
Well, and the other thing I was gonna ask too is if you had got rid of the Oshkosh and got another 550, would you have uses for it besides just plowing?
Yes, and it's kind of where we've been going with the 550s is we started out with Rangers, we went to half tons. The half tons work, it just depends on what we're like with the projects we've had the last few years, using them for plowing and then cold patching and leaf sucking, everything else. The 550s are more useful year round. So we use them, the 550s leave the shop about every day. Might only be 1 or 2 of them, but they leave the shop. If we're hauling something, they haul as much as that Sterling, not quite as much as a Sterling, like when we're hauling out snow, but they get around easier. They're just more useful. We got cul-de-sacs.
that Oshkosh has really one use for plowing snow, and that's all the main roads, straight shots. You can't clean intersections down with it. Well, Paul did, but
It's good for spreading sand. It worked. It's a nice truck for that stuff. It's just, it honestly, when we had that blizzard or whatever a few years, maybe it was more than a few years back, but I actually broke through with the 350 and the Oshkosh followed me. So it's not like, I had snow up to my mirrors and I was plowing it with that. If it's not over the blade, it'll plow it. It just takes a little more work. And it's harder on those smaller trucks pushing through something like that. But as you said, doesn't happen every year. Most years are
for the
big
most
snow.
part, you guys get out pretty early when it starts snowing, right?
We don't wait till there's a bunch of snow on the ground. If there's an inch or 2 on the ground to where we're not just banging concrete, we go out and blade.
And the worst time is if we get a 8-hour snowstorm or 10-hour snowstorm that.
Yeah, and then we just, like the one a couple weeks ago, we just quit at midnight. I slept in my truck for a couple hours, went back out till morning. That's what we do. Let some come down while people aren't out.
All right, so let's say we do this, Jerry. We're already $7,000 over. This was before we were gonna buy a new truck. So now how do you suggest we pay for it?
The Oshkosh has some value.
It's not gonna have that kind of value.
No, but it has some value though. 10,000 maybe, 15.
Okay, so now we're $67,000.
My suggestion is to buy a used truck that's not gonna be a truck that's gonna be used every day.
The Oshkosh repairing it is still cheaper than buying a used truck.
You look at the labor it saves over time, that's a factor too. Like
put in that Oshkosh?
Any idea, like $5,000?
No, I mean, we were putting a decent amount in hydraulic lines. Last year, we got on a program to
You're making your own now.
rent, yeah, we make our own hydraulic lines, so we don't, the one year we spent about 3,000 on hydraulic lines. Just from plowing, not just on
That's on all the
Oshkosh, but that's on all the trucks. So it made sense to do that, but yeah, that's kind of, the Oshkosh would be the most expensive one when something breaks.
But we already have enough trucks for the amount of employees we have.
With the Oshkosh. That includes the Oshkosh.
It's both dump
We
trucks.
have half tons. You can still plow with a half ton.
He has 5 plow trucks and 5 guys to drive.
I just don't think this is the year to get a new.
I mean,
truck.
we can
Start
pull
buying.
back on doing the Oshkosh and you reevaluate it too and see what we want to do. That I'm not against that. This was just an off year and it worked out in our replacement schedule that we could do the work on the Oshkosh. It's not like it's gonna, the bed's not gonna fall off it this summer if we don't do it. It just worked in our replacement schedule to do it this year and still have enough to next year have money aside and be able to buy what we need to next year. So
Which line item is the Oshkosh repairs?
it's under the vehicle.
Maybe you could do the frame 1 year and
I'm gonna
know,
put in
all
my
you listed
notes
out.
is that we'll reevaluate it. More by then. That way we at
Yeah.
least have the conversation before it's, money is spent or whatever, just so everyone's on the same page. I'm fine with just having it in the notes that it needs to be reevaluated.
And then we'd have to figure out what it would cost to get a wing installed on the
Yeah.
Sterling also.
I mean, we do, the bigger trucks do have their place. They're nicer for spreading salt. They work a little better than the 550 salt spreaders. But aside from that, the 550s do 10 times the work.
Is the belly plow useful?
Yes, it's just, it was more useful when I first started and I don't think we didn't run out when it started snowing, so stuff stuck down a lot more. There's not, we go out pretty early now and keep stuff cut back so that we're not trying to clean it up after it's been packed down.
Yeah, I think your snow removal has been really great. I mean, you can go to some towns where
Yeah, go to Tipton. I've seen Tipton way worse.
some of their streets don't look like they've been plowed. Within a few days, ours are pretty much down to the street, so I think you're doing a good job of the plowing.
Well, let's keep Matt moving on then. What else you got?
So then the other big things are in the water. We have that agreement for Suez if we're gonna do the tower agreement. And then the other thing is we had looked into getting a tower added, a radio tower for our water meters. So our water meters right now, we're about half and half where we have radio reads on them. The radio reads, how they work now is Tim goes and walks the route for 500 and some meters. Then he goes and drives for the other 540 or whatever it is. So, 578. So the 578 we already have installed. This would put a tower up that would then pick up that signal. So when he was done walking, he'd be done. He wouldn't go drive and do any of that. It would just come back in here, Leslie pull it off the computer and send the bills out. The nice thing about that is as new homes come in, we put radio reads on them. We don't gain more meters to read. It just goes into this group because they all get radio reads. So then it just pick them up and we don't have to add to our workload with that. So that's what that is with the 33,000 out of that. That was something we've looked at I think they're looking at it before I started. And we've looked at over the years and the price on it just keeps going down and down. So right now it's actually something that's attainable, I think.
Mechanicsville and some of the towns up there have radio reads, I know.
Yeah.
She just pushes a button, gets on the computer and instantly reads all the water meters. Nobody walks anywhere.
That's how the mobile home court does it.
So
It's the thing, you gotta go that way.
I'd say the only time you might walk somewhere,
One road meter, once
the
in a
meter
while.
doesn't work. Like, house might go out, but
Do you have a census, Matt, of how long it will take to change all these meters out? Or projected time?
I've been trying to put in about 40 of them a year into our budget. So if you think on that, you're looking at least another 10 years. I mean, yeah, probably 12 years. But if you push at it pretty hard, you could do it. You don't want to do them too quick. The problem with meters is you either need to do it like the mobile home park did, where they went in, they spent all the money at once, replaced them all. And now they got to have the money in 15, 20 years to replace them all again, because that's, or you do a percentage every year, and hopefully by the time you hit 20 years, you're rolling back to the first ones and you just keep going through. And that's kind of where we're at, trying to maintain that. So then we got some set aside in there for equipment for next year. Go into the sewer. The main thing was that manhole on North Elephant. I don't expect that to be a huge deal. It's a fairly shallow manhole. It's just, it obviously probably has some breaks on the edge of it for that concrete to be settled that way and pushed up. So we'll get that replaced and whatever piping around it. Storm sewer, we have 3 intakes, 2 on North Elephant and 1 on North Side. The 2 on North Elephant had grates made out of rebar at some point 30 years ago. I don't know, probably when the street went in, I suppose. And those are falling apart. So we need to replace those. The boxes on both of those are probably gonna have to be replaced. It's all kind of poured as one solid chunk. So we're gonna go in and do those. The one on North Side is to the west of Oliphant, and it actually has a brick intake there, and that one's caving in, so it's starting to suck from under the street and under a driveway. So we'll have that one cut out, dug up, and we'll pour back new ones there. And then the repairs on North Downey from Kirsten Lane to 518 North Downey. That's something that we were approached by, oh geez, can't think of his name now, Clark up there. He mows the ditch out in front of his place. So Kirsten Lane's out here on North Downey, the new places. So when they came in and put that in, they put in a driveway, culvert underneath of it basically. So we're gonna do new pipe from that culvert to the next driveway and then fill that in. And it'd be basically the same thing as what's to the north of it with that intake, kind of an area intake. That's what we're looking at doing there. Clark, I'm going to talk to him again. He was willing to pay for some of the dirt work or most of the dirt work and hauling the dirt in if we were willing to do that work, because he mows it and doesn't like that after they did that work, it became very steep. So, and it didn't get put back the best either. So we were approached about that, and I told him I'd put it in here and I'd see where it went. If we can do it, we'll get that done. If he's still interested, I'm gonna have to approach him again about that. So. Yeah, like I said, for the most part, gas is going up, vehicle repairs are going up. Basically the same across all the budgets. That's the majority of it, unless anybody's got any questions.
But a couple other points that we got down road use. Or any like tree trimming, since that's more under community beautification. Move that to the general fund, as well as my time, Leslie's time, Heidi's time to help out with road use. We just had that come out of the general fund. And we did cut down overtime from 15% to 10%. That way it's consistent with the police department's policy. They're at 10% too. Just can't really do 15% overtime. So we did kind of cut down on trying to be a little bit more efficient. Labor wise too. Yeah, between all that stuff, that's how we got down.
That's not what I'm saying. Overtime went up to 18,000.
Because we're keeping track of it now separately. In the past, we never kept track of it.
It was kept track, but it was within the salaries.
It was, yeah.
It just wasn't
separate
pulled
line
out
item.
separate.
But
We knew what we were spending. It just wasn't actually in a separate line item.
So that's why the salaries
Part of it,
all lowered,
correct.
Yeah.
Part of it.
but the overtime increased.
Part of it is, part of it is, yes, we cut down, the overtime is taken off on it. Some of the other time though too is like my time to help out streets, same with Leslie, same with Heidi will be on general fund. And some of, most likely Logan's time will be helping out Parks and Rec. So yes, some of it is, but it's also that 4% increase in salaries too adds on top of it. So, yes, overtime did get cut down on, but it's kept track.
It's going to
of
be
it.
visible now,
Correct. Correct.
where it wasn't visible.
Yes,
Before.
that is a better way to put it.
So are we, I'm not quite understanding this. So are we cutting down on how much overtime they're gonna put in, or we're just moving it around?
It's cutting out the maximum that we can get. So it'll just make it so I have to make sure that, like, sometimes I only have a couple guys come in to do snow removal. If it's a small thing where I can just have two come in, put down salt, sand, brine, that's what I do. It's just maximizing that, and then if we have projects or whatever, they're gonna go from 6:30 in the morning to 3:30. And we won't stay late, we won't work through lunch, and we'll just make that work.
Yeah, because I see on our last Public Works, it's got 208 hours of projected overtime hours for all the employees but yourself.
Well,
That equates to about 4 hours a week for every employee in your Public Works, so.
it does, but I have a breakdown of it so we have to have guys on call every single week, or every week, we got an on-call schedule. So a guy has to be on every weekend. He works Saturday and Sunday, 2 hours. So you're guaranteed those, guaranteed. You got those 4 hours, you got to subtract out every time we have a holiday, somebody has to come in. There's a lot of stuff that just set stuff that eats up the overtime.
DNR
So it
requires-
doesn't end up being that 4 hours.
Yeah,
Can't those
no
hours
water.
be used as our flex time? Take
We
off
don't have a flex
2 hours
time
early on
policy.
Thursday and Friday and come in if you're coming in on the weekend.
I mean,
I would
that's
tell
it.
you to suck it.
Well, I wasn't gonna say that, but I mean, it's asking guys that, when we're on call, they're not allowed to, they gotta be within 30 minutes of being here. They can't drink, there's just a lot of stuff you can't do. They gotta have their phone on them. They're basically in the same boat as I am every day. I'm glad you said it. I wasn't gonna say it. I just- But it's
I
just
thought it
not.
was like being on a volunteer fire department.
That comes from being self-employed.
It just to them and to me is not a good trade-off. I mean, that's how I am all the
Okay.
time.
Okay.
I'm always
I
on.
accept
so.
that.
I think before it was 225 hours.
And I have records of like what we've used, and we don't, other than 1 year, a long time ago when Colton got on me, we do not go over that overtime. We average typically in the 150 to 180 range. I say they do. I average in the 200 to 350 range, 250 to 350 range. I don't get overtime, but that's what my hours would reflect if I got overtime.
Okay.
That's what I got.
the one question I have, and this is more for Adam.
Yep.
So you took staff out of roads.
Yep.
Did you take staff out of water and sewer and those types of things too?
Yeah, yep. And so, as I kind of alluded to at our full council meeting, that 50% of my wages were coming out of water and sewer.
Well, I don't disagree with removing you, but you know, like Leslie's
Yep,
pay, I mean, she's the important part of the water and sewer because she's
Correct.
the one that does the billing and gets the money.
correct. So I asked her, and then I asked Matt for their ideal allocation that happens each week. So correct, we still got,
So Leslie still
Leslie.
has some of hers.
and I still have 10%, but not 50% of
All
my
right,
salary.
that's all I need.
Didn't we just put them in sewer and water a few years ago?
No, they've been in there.
Streets. I mean, not the staff. We used to give the majority of our pay out of that. But that was 2012 or 2014 or something. Okay, what's next?
It's capital projects. So what I have, I guess you can look at it two different ways, either in the purple or that draft sheet of how CIP is funded. The way it'll look like in your summary is a big, huge spike in revenue and expenses because all that stuff is hitting this next fiscal year. So I've got the wastewater treatment plant at about $7 million being expended this year, assuming it all goes through. It may not, but I'd rather not amend it. Wapsie Creek widening, I have that being funded internally with no bonds. Total of $1 million. $700,000 will be a grant. 100,000 will be from the rec bond. We have like 160, I think, left in that. We have 100,000 coming from general fund. That is from backfill. I have weaned us off backfill to pay for that project and then build our reserves up to where it needs to be in the general fund. So the whole, I guess, backfill is, I guess the way I've got it is it's just extra money at this point, whatever we get. 60,000 from local option sales tax and then 40,000 from storm sewer. As we get more money over the years and roll back, I'd like to pay a little bit of interest back in storm sewer. We'll have to pass a resolution for this, but I know storm sewer is kind of being a growing problem here. So technically I'm borrowing from Matt's fund. to pay for
Storm
that
sewer
project.
should be increasing with every new water meter. Increase the bill state. Storm sewer should be increasing.
It is, but it's not as big of a fund as you think. It only brings in about 60,000 a year. And so with everything going on, I didn't want to propose any type of increase on that, but that may be something. Because 60,000 a year is not going to cover what's going on with the city. But that's about all it generates. I know Leslie and I have to do, we're going to try and do an audit of what we're doing with our industrial areas just to make sure, because there's a weird calculation with that. And I know Leslie's talked with you about it, probably Dave too.
Dave's the one that came up with the formula somehow, I don't know how.
Oh.
But Axion and.
X amount of
they pay
square
quite a bit.
feet, yeah,
Yeah,
X amount of square
rooftop.
feet, yeah, yeah. And then still in this fiscal year, I've got Hoover Roundabout. Do I think it'll be $1 million? No, but I just want to make sure it's in there, so we don't have to amend the budget. And then I've got one project of East Water Mains getting done. I talked with Maggie, and and this is just me talking with you guys, I don't know how I could fund both Wapsie Creek internally and the roundabout without taking a bond. And so we can bond mid-year. We would just need to raise the revenue the following fiscal year. So interest is due 12 months after you take out a loan. And then all of it has to be spent within 2 years.
We need to take that debt out before December. So we can ask the TIF. That's when the debt gets incurred. That's when we can ask, in TIF asking.
We probably would ask for TIF asking, I do have it in here. This next December, yes, we would ask for that expired Acciona debt, that 108,000. We would use that. And if Chad Cooney's enough along to pay for that debt, we would do 45,000 a year through TIF Parkside Hills. That's really conservative. If what he has going in does go in, it's gonna be more than 45,000. I just was being safe when I was giving you guys an estimate.
I mean, if what he has going in is accessible, that they pay an actual tax.
Well,
March.
I'm talking value. So
He's just being conservative on what the actual value is gonna be. So if it's $2 million, he's assuming it's $1 million. That might be
All right,
maybe a little bit more.
I get it.
I don't know if it's 50%.
That's
Something like
fine.
that.
That's great.
So maybe September, we'd have to take out the bond. Because I'm assuming that's hopefully when they start drawing on the roundabout. If it gets pushed later, then we would just draw on a loan later. Hopefully bid out East Main projects late fall or winter of 2022 or like January 2023. Certify those debt payments, as you mentioned in that December. How do we fund levying the debt? Would be 108,000 from TIF, Acciona loan, 45,000 or more from TIF Parkside, and 180,000 a year through the debt service levy. And that would be that. Oh, what did we talk about last time? $1.20, $1.30 increase. So that could be up to $90 a year, give or take, depending on TIF, how much we get in TIF for a $200,000 home. And hopefully in 2024, we would get the first project done for East Side Mains. And then 25 hopefully would be the second one. All debt would be spent in 2 years. Well, if there's more TIF debt that we can consider to pay for those loans, we will. Each December, we'll review. Fiscal year 25 to 27, we will have expiring debt from, I think, the 2013 and 2015 bond, if I've got it remembered right. We would use that expiring debt levy to pay for East Side Main until we're ready for Cedar Johnson in 2028. And then we would use that expiring debt to fund Cedar Johnson Road. And we'll continue to evaluate if there's more things we can do, but hopefully that's your 5-year draft plan. It is tentative. I do have to have some meetings with Maggie and with Dave to make sure it's kosher. We're gonna try and make sure that local contractors get the bids. Both Dave and I talked this morning. There's no guarantee just because you have to split it up into how many projects and you have to separate it by cement work and by water work. But that's priority one when we're talking East Side Mains, is to try and give local contractors an option. But I think both of us won't promise, but we'll do everything we can to try and make it be local contractors. Then hopefully in fiscal year 27 or 28, we will redo another 5-year capital improvement plan. So that is the very draft, and some of those dates will need to change, and there'll be more details in a final plan, but I at least want to get you a tentative skeleton schedule of what it'll look like.
That's like in a perfect world, right? Well, whenever we have a water main break, it seems to be $6,000 to $10,000. All right.
Let's say, they were like $2,500 bucks.
Three, I'm thinking three to about six.
So how much?
About 2,500. You really, if they're in the middle of the street, they go up. If they're in grass, we had one that took an hour after they got there.
Where am I seeing?
Sometimes
Anyhow.
you might see them added up though too. Like in
Oh,
the bills, it might be lynches. They'll send us like 3 of them at a time or whatever. And it might say 6,000.
okay.
Yeah,
Alright.
they're typically not that much unless they're.
But did we budget for like 5 of them a year? Because it seems like we have about 5 a year. Okay, thank you.
We had 2 in one night.
One
One right out here,
Single one.
one of them right out here.
That was a tiny little hole. too.
But that wasn't ours.
You did that.
Yeah, well, through the water main.
It was.
Oh, the one that Tim found. Spotted.
Said it wasn't a water main.
Greenview water main. Where are we on that?
It's pretty much on hold. So when we did that section of
Repair.
College Street from Fourth to Fifth, that project came in, the cost kept going up and going up and going up. I talked with Redmond, Gordon about whether we held off on it. I was told that we were to keep going, so we did it. It basically bled into this budget, which ate up anything we would spend on that.
Okay.
But it was either that or we just left that and didn't. So that's kind of where we're at. Keep going on that project or scrap that one.
Now you're already
In
done.
order to
Start.
start. So, and that one out there is, like I just was talking about, it's in the grass. It's in the grass. Puts people out having a break, but
Okay.
Right now, I say water fund looks good. If we give it a year or two, we'll be able to assess where we're at balance wise. This fiscal year, we're projecting a surplus of 148,000. If we do that Suez maintenance project or maintenance program, you'd minus probably 80,000 from that. So you're probably talking 60,000 surplus the next couple years. But if that keeps going, we may be able to self-fund a project. You know, it may not be a large project, but potentially looping something, we may be able to self-fund that in the next 3 to 4 years. But let's see how this year goes and make sure our projections are correct. But that may be a possibility of doing a couple years down the road. Self-funded, no interest. So
It's a lofty goal. Nice.
Not that big of a loop, really, is it, Matt? Is it
well,
pretty much,
it's actually a little over 1,000 foot.
is it pretty much from the
From like your corner there up to the corner.
other corner? Yeah.
So the last one we did on Main Street was about 1,000 foot and it was 160,000. There's a lot more street and stuff. That was also 5 years ago.
Well, this don't have any streets. This could be trenched in.
Well, they repair stuff to the street.
No, it's all off.
It's all off the street.
Yeah.
What
Every
about
time it
service
breaks, it's in their
lines?
yard. Just a
Service
matter of hooking
lines.
up, digging up, with the water, the service line.
capital reserve levy, since our, I guess our debt or I guess our property tax portion of our debt is going down. So to keep the tax rate the same, I increased the capital rates almost to the state max, not quite there. I've got us at 67 cents. Go up another half a cent, probably next year as more goes down. That is bringing 115,000 this fiscal year. By the end of next fiscal year, if we don't touch it, we could have a balance of 250,000. You know, if we've got a future water project, we could maybe combine that surplus with this, or we can just wait until another bond, or if the project costs more than what we anticipated, we could use this money. So
There was my question that I had forgot. Was that as we're planning all this out, it seems like it's awful tight. And I guess what worries me is the whatnots that come up where, you know, the school comes in and wants to turn a lane and we're sitting there, or Johnson County decides we need a roundabout, you know, and those things weren't ever even on the radar. And now you have 60 days to make a decision.
We need a policy to spend that reserve levy.
You're already-
Would that be helpful?
Well, I mean,
Just kind of set it.
that would be kind of where we would go, but I mean, even at $250,000, I mean, if, you know, that's a lot of money, but, you know, for the type of projects that's been coming up, it's not. You know,
and I've never used this levy before, so I'd have to ask the state before we even expended it, just so I can make sure we're doing it correctly. But at some point, maybe a policy, at some point, it may just be council. I mean, you guys are just gonna have to decide what's worthy of what it's worth or not. There's nothing wrong with holding it for a future project. There's nothing wrong with holding it for an improvised project where the DOT or Johnson County says you have to do this. Just as you're already winning by having it, because you're gonna save the city. Whether if it's not today, then in 5 years, you're gonna save them $100,000 in interest over over how many years, so.
While we're talking about upcoming possible projects that we're not, I seen in your letter that they may look at water service lines.
And maybe Matt can talk about that a little bit more. I mentioned the
And what kind of,
lead.
what would we be looking at as a city with that happen?
What they're doing right now is kind of, so they've asked utilities to map their services. So we're gonna have to know what every single house has. And then they're gonna take all that information, they're gonna come back and they're gonna say every town or towns this size or whatever have to replace this percentage every year. And then it comes down to, we don't own them, they're homeowner owned. So do we put that all on the homeowners? Some towns that have done these set up a program where they give 500 to the first 15 people that come in and say they're gonna do theirs that year as an incentive to get them done quicker, because otherwise, you know, it's hard to get somebody to pay $2,500 to have a new service ran, or 3,000 or whatever they are. So
what's the rationale on this?
it's
Get rid of
all,
lead.
it's
What?
fueled
Get rid
by,
of that.
yeah, lead and copper.
And
Most-
copper?
Copper, they take them together because it's just metals, so.
It's essentially the Flint aftermath, and it's
Yeah.
taken this long for some sort of policy and incentives to hit.
That would hit a lot of.
Well, here's the deal. There's
It's gonna
some,
be plastic next.
there's some towns that still make you put copper in. At least X amount of it, anything that goes under the road has to be copper. And then you clamp on. I mean, that's a new house that's being built today. They still make you put copper in.
It wasn't that long ago, they wouldn't even let you use plastic.
Yeah.
Our code actually says copper is one of the, I don't remember if we actually changed it yet or not, but it used to say that's what you had to use.
I mean, like even in a new house.
Well, we
you
just
shouldn't even
follow
use plastic in
residential
a- in a
Whatever's in the
house,
residence.
inside the house. It'd all be copper. It wasn't that long ago.
So if I recall correctly, it's not necessarily the copper pipe itself.
It's the
But
solder.
Historically, they used lead as a soldering material or the
That's
connection.
been out, that's been gone for 40 years though, lead free
Yeah, but it's-
solder.
I get that, but we have some houses in town that are older than 40 years. Roger.
And that's
I
also
think we have quite a
their
few that are in town that are older than 40 years.
Faucets and all of those, anything that has brass in it.
So that's what it leads to. It's not necessarily the copper pipe, it's the joint material that's lead.
Well,
Like in lead pipe, obviously.
I
you
guess I
know.
kind of bring this up because I'm pretty sure some of our downtown businesses have lead pipe.
The little red house I tore down that mud pipe. Abandoned.
It's just, it's not gonna be easy to replace lead.
So the nice thing is
downtown
though,
buildings.
if we do the east
No.
side replacements, we do the services as we do the mains.
How do you find them?
And
Oh,
yeah, I mean, pretty much when we did the other main, every other main we've done, we replace the services up to the curb stop. So that gets them most of the way. They gotta do into their house though. So then it's just figuring out how we get that last fourth of it or whatever done.
This is a question we'll need to discuss when we're
Okay.
talking
I'm gonna
east
need
side
to-
mains, so do we just fix the service lines and charge it to the homeowner? That may be something to discuss, if that's the direction the federal government's going.
Better
Something like
off
that.
just getting a little ahead of it than waiting for them to tell us, because then it's just gonna be every year we gotta have so much put aside to do it. so.
I'm still to the point. What if you just say no? No. I mean, you know, it's just like the state comes in here and tells you you gotta do this, and it's gonna cost this much money, and we're sitting there like, how are we gonna pay for this, you know? They don't care. Now the federal government's gonna do it too? No, no.
Michigan's getting a
Federal funds
bailout.
away.
Do what?
They start taking federal funds away.
We don't get nothing from them anyway.
Yep, Michigan's getting a bailout.
Well, that sounds like a pretty
You need to put a new
typical-
water line in underneath the
Adam-
interstate and you gotta pay for it and we'll pay you back.
Yeah.
That's their recourse. It's not that they can just come in here and do something, but when we, like the COVID money, the ARPA money, they could use that against us, so.
Give it back. Just give it back. Tell them we ain't putting in a sewer treatment plant. Here's your $300,000 back, and we just saved $7.5 million.
I think the best part about the whole thing is to get to fix all of our water lines, and Flint still has lead water. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
We ought to see if we can. We ought to annex a chunk of the interstate and put cameras up. Speed
I've got 2
cameras.
speeding tickets from Leclerc.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
never
cool.
gonna shop in Leclerc again. It's like, go
How
east,
about you just don't?
Or you could not speed, I was just gonna say.
69 and a.
They do put
Nice.
signs up that say.
Yeah, they
radar
tell you about it.
or-
Yeah,
And they
and
don't
my
get
wife
you
and I
for 5
discussed
over.
it.
You gotta be going.
Going through Davenport, start slowing down. We get home from our week vacation and we got a letter in the mail from Leclerc, Iowa.
You technically don't have. to pay
$80,
those.
please.
Oh.
You know, you technically don't have to pay those. Prove it with me in the car. I'm not even joking with you. That
Let's
is a
move on. We
legal
don't need to
defense.
talk about that.
It is.
It's not
If I
that
never
easy.
plan on going the interstate that way again, I would.
This coming year, we've got $1.4 million in debt. 400,000 of that, 470,000 of that is the lagoon. Next fiscal year, Acciona debt will be paid off in 2025. It's the 2015 bond that's paid off in 2027. The 2016 is paid off. Asking for around 250,000 in the debt service property levy, and the rest of the debts are paid by TIF, service fees such as, you know, your sewer charges and local option sales tax. For TIF, we're asking for 492,000. 77,000 is in rebates. So that's to Casey's, that's to Little Lights, KLM Part 4, and then the LMI housing requirement. Yes, pro and a con. Could have roughly 150,000 more in the general fund if we didn't TIF that much. However, city would be missing out on 2/3, which is paying for projects and lowering the debt service levy. So it's both good and bad. But just thought I'd throw that picture out there. It's not my decision to make. That's for you guys to make. So local option sales tax probably is not in your purple expenses. Revenue 252,000, expenses 287. There's only a deficit of 35,000 because we're using some of the loss to pay for Wapsie Creek. That's a one-time 60,000. Otherwise, we're at a surplus. 16% increase is projected by Iowa League of Cities. Could be more here since there's a little bit more activity in eastern Iowa. That's a statewide average. But overall, loss looks pretty good. Tort and liability is the rest of your expenses. It's just added up by each department. For your water pays for water account, sewer pays for sewer. Those benefits, those IPERs are all part of the sewer and water fees. Your same with your streets, but your general fund, your police, your fire, that's your city hall, your library, that's on the general fund. That tort and liability and that employee benefits are what's on the levy. So we're trying to make water pay for water, sewer pay for sewer. It's always been that way, but just I'm not doing anything different, just kind of explaining the difference. Tort and liability, I'm trying to get it to break even. I know for a long time, if not the last fiscal year and the fiscal year before that, we borrowed some money from employee benefits. It's a different levy, but they're both kind of amount. There's more flexibility from the state on those two. And they coincide with each other, just like debt and capital service kind of coincide with each other. Same with tort and liability and employee benefits. They kind of coincide with each other. I do know Gordon last year in his meeting minutes, he did say that, you know, ICAP was going up. He tried the levy enough for it. He did not, but he tried. So he was up front with you guys, but I'm hoping to bump just that up a little bit. Employee benefits is 335,000. I just have it being an in and out at this point. Revenue 335,000, expenses 335,000. Assumes a 20% increase to our health insurance again. I'm not sure. No one knows what it's going to be next year. And then IPERS remains the same for public safety employees. They get more in IPERS so that they can retire sooner. And then for employees like myself is 9.4%. It's close to 10% for police and fire.
So employee benefits is it's a line item on the levy.
Yep.
We're gonna keep that where it is. Or adjust it.
It'll be a very small adjustment.
Down.
Basically the same. It probably would be up only because I assume health insurance is just going to go up. But I can tweak it down if that's up to you
I
guys.
thought we had a large excess in that.
We have an excess, large. I don't know if I'd say large. Comfortable, yes. That's why I have revenue and expenses equaling at $1. But it's up to you guys. Could we hypothetically draw down on it? Yes. Would I be cautiously worried? No, but if we do that 2-3 years in a row. So if you guys want to do one time down, I'm okay with it. Okay. Okay. Any questions on that fun stuff? Employee benefits includes IPERS, it includes health insurance or any type of optional insurance, so that short-term, long-term disability. And then it includes FICA and your Medicare tax too. So all that stuff, it's not just health insurance, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. Estimated tax levy, we'll know the exact amount soon. Heidi's working on it right now. I project it'll be $13.11. Last year it was $13.09. So it's basically a 2-cent increase. So on the property tax side, it'll be $2.15 per household of a home at $200,000. If we do, again, you guys will have to vote on this, but if we do equal out solid waste right now, we're not paying for the Cedar County fees. We're paying for the contractor, wherever we store our trash. That's being subsidized through the general fund. If we do decide to not subsidize it out of the general fund anymore, it'll be about $1.50 per month per household. So your projected total increase on taxpayers is $20.15 for the average $200,000 home.
Could be levied.
No, I'm just explaining, that's a good question. I'm just explaining what is it gonna cost the taxpayers as a whole, all these projections in this current budget. So that includes fees, that includes taxes, everything.
So currently, the fees we collect for garbage are not enough to pay the tipping.
Correct.
tipping fee. What was that, 13, 15,000?
About 15 to 16,000. Oh,
So I have a question about that.
Yep.
Because there's going to be lots of people that aren't pitching in their portion of that. So like anybody that has a dumpster that doesn't use trash, they're not going to be helping pay for that tipping fee.
I don't know how we charge, but assuming they have a private contract on their own, then they essentially will be paying their own tipping fee, I would assume, through that private company.
No,
You don't think so?
well,
Okay.
because
Okay.
my understanding of the tipping fee is it's West Branch buying into being able to use that landfill. So like if, say, Nick lived in an apartment, didn't pay a tipping fee
Mhm.
because he had a dumpster, but he can still go out and use that landfill because he's a resident of West Branch. Am I right?
Well, the property owner of that apartment,
Is not paying.
they're not paying that tipping fee either.
No.
Because it's not an assessment on the tax. Or they're not paying for garbage.
Right.
That's the way I understand it.
But now they're paying for a recycling.
Yep, they are paying a recycling fee. Even apartment dwellers.
Right.
They don't have to pay the tipping fee to take that dumpster somewhere, no?
I will have Leslie.
I'm not
explain
sure.
that
I'm the
to you.
apartment building owner and I have a garbage can and I'm just gonna take that, do it for free.
Well, no, it even goes a step further. I was picking on apartment.
No, that's, I'm
buildings.
just asking.
It was just yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I'm asking, but don't you
So-
pay a tipping fee on your big dumpster though? And then when you pass that on to your tenants?
Well, no, because if you're doing it, if you're say you use ABC,
Yeah, they go to,
they're probably ain't even gonna take
they
it
go there,
there.
they're gonna go to
Yeah.
Johnson County. or whatever.
I was just curious.
But do the
I don't
private,
know.
do the private companies that, ABC and Waste Management, do they pay something for the right to dump at Johnson County or?
No,
Cedar
they're
County?
supposed to take it, they're supposed to take the garbage wherever it came from. So if they pick it up in West Branch, legally, truthfully, legally, if they were honest, they couldn't even take it to Johnson County. It would have to go there.
Leslie and I asked Steve, who owns Johnson County Refuse, if he ever takes his garbage to Iowa City, because it's actually cheaper
Right.
to dump it there than take it there. He said, no, he doesn't. He always takes West Branch to tip it.
But do those firms, do they pay something to dump, or do they pay?
Yeah,
Yeah, they
They'd
will.
have to pay to dump.
they're paying the tip in land transfer
I don't know if
station.
they're paying
It's by
over and
volume.
above,
Yeah.
like a one-time yearly fee to dump in it.
They shouldn't have to because the communities are supposed to be paying that.
You're right. they shouldn't
Oh,
have
right.
to, but
There's more. So as I was thinking about this, I thought, well, why don't we just not put it on the garbage? Why don't we make it a water meter? Something you put on the water meter. So then at least every,
Landfill fee.
yeah, that way every unit is by a water meter. Well, then I got to thinking, well, now that's not fair because mobile home court still isn't going to be paying for that because they only got one water meter. There's all the people out there. So there's just a bunch of food for thought. Think about it.
I don't think there will be a perfect way of distributing that fee if we go to it. I think that may be a discussion you guys have, which way do we go? But I think you're probably right, Colton, that there's not going to be a perfect, everyone's paying $1.50.
But it would seem if the more people that we could get, I guess my whole idea is the more people that we can get paying this,
Okay.
maybe the lower we can get that number.
Yep.
So it doesn't cost $1.50 a month. Maybe it only costs $1 a month.
So that other company that came in here and tried to get us, what, Republic?
He was gonna haul his stuff somewhere else.
Right. He said he doesn't need to see the county line.
They
we
own
still
the
had to pay
landfill.
for it though.
But we just still had to
We
pay
still had to
for it
pay for it.
because
That was one thing that previous administrator was left out, that he kept trying to say, we don't have to pay that. We still have to pay it, even though the
We would
garbage.
still have to
goes away.
pay Tipton
You get some of
transfer
those
station.
big companies like Waste Management and stuff like that.
I didn't
They
know
can
that.
get deals to, they pay a certain amount of money to take it other places. So they might,
Public was taking it all the way to Illinois.
yeah, that's what I mean. So they'll have a big contract with some other landfill that'll cover whatever the cost. So if you want to not use Cedar County, it might cost you like $5,000. Like you can pay off the government to not use it. So some landfill in Illinois or somewhere might be like, hey, we'll pay you that $5,000 to cover that cost for whatever you should be taking it to bring it here. So
Well,
then
it's
they
just
get
like-
more garbage. Yeah, there's money in
Just like
garbage.
Johnson County, a lot of times it's cheaper to take it to Johnson County than it is to take it to Cedar County, because one's by weight and one's by volume.
but
If I got a heavy load, I'm going that way. If I got a real light load, big volume, I'm going that way.
you got to lie.
And it depends.
You got to
where-
lie if you go to Iowa City.
Johnson County's been lying to us for years.
Well, you could go there. You can't go there.
Well, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It depends where it comes from. It does.
Yeah,
If I'm closer that way.
I almost always just go to Iowa City and I just
So,
tell stories.
How did they,
They
how did they get away with making us pay this?
Because when I put the transfer station in, every community.
You don't
had to help pay for it.
have to pay for it.
As residents of Cedar
We just
County.
can't
we-
go
You
there.
can't go there, so that's.
So if you ever wanted to take any garbage out there and you're like, hey, I'm a resident of West Branch, they're gonna go.
They don't ask you.
They won't, they probably won't, but they could. And you'd be like, and they'd be like, nope, we don't want your garbage. You
I
can't.
don't know if that'd
Because
be
your
them
community
what they
didn't
would
pay the fee to use it.
So I'm paying for something that I have never, ever
Could
used.
be.
I
Plus,
don't-
your
I don't know
garbage
what
goes
the
to from your
policy
curb. And you're not paying for it right now. The city is. He's proposing that you pay.
You're paying for it in a way.
All right, I am paying this.
Well,
Correct.
yeah,
I pay my
yeah,
taxes.
your taxes, but I meant
Correct.
like,
Right, but I mean,
technically you're paying for some of it, but.
It's kind of an essential service, getting rid of garbage. We all,
maybe to
Does
you,
pay
not to
for
me. No, I can go and dump my garbage in a ditch. I'm fine with that.
There's a dumpster down by the town.
I hope
hall.
you're not fine with that.
Dumpster
This
is
is
right.
dumpster right
I
now.
usually just go to one of
The
Jerry's
town hall.
rentals. That's what I do with all my extra crap.
Jerry's got one in his apartment.
I was gonna say, I just go to other people's rentals in town. and
Kevin's got one of his.
You got tower apartments, you got,
Oh,
That's
yeah.
kind of why we went. when we
Those people
switched
know
over
where
to
they
the
are.
oh, I know.
company Like we did to eliminate that.
I
A lot
think
of
we
us
ought to
did-
just
a lot of
get
us businesses
dumpsters,
didn't wanna go that route.
city dumpsters and. dump
Could
them
get a
that
city
way.
dump
Take
truck.
it out to the big dumpsters. It's good.
Huh?
Could get a city dump truck.
We got the Oshkosh.
I was
Yeah.
just gonna say that. We
Go
got-
ahead.
Yeah, we give them.
Then we can use it in the summer. We don't have to park it all summer. Maybe if we used it more, it might not rot so much.
Oh, garbage will rot them up.
Oh, I was gonna say.
All right, Adam, where are we?
Might be able to use
Oh,
some of the
sorry.
extra.
We're way
Yeah.
behind schedule.
Sorry.
Some of the extra use from the summer usage on the roads when we first used it in the fall and save some salt.
I'm done on the nitty gritty stuff.
Okay, now, a couple weeks ago, at this work session, we talked about possibly a $2 or so increase.
It was 20, and I guess I should have done a better job explaining that. With Heidi and I working with Maggie, and actually getting our physical amortization schedules, when we entered those in, then it lowered our debt service levy. So that's why it's only $2 instead of $20 that we were expecting. I did try to bump up capital service levy enough as much as we could. That way it's equal, not evil, equal. But it's still not perfect. So you're seeing a raise in town hall, but you're seeing a decrease in our debt service. And you're seeing an increase, a little small increase in, I guess your employee benefits, and a little bit down still in debt service. So when we hit that February meeting, we'll have it lined up, what we've asked each year and why it's changed. So in February, you'll see that. And I know that's how we're supposed to break it down by state, but I know that's how Gordon broke it down to you guys in February was, he laid it down. So the first meeting was as tentative as I thought it would be. But now we have more information. We're about as accurate as we're gonna get.
Okay.
So not as high as I first thought. So next steps forward. We'll have the procedural items, and what I mean by that, your public hearings and all that, February to March. I'll try and start working on some of the financial administrative policies. So hopefully we'll have something with TIF. Reserve requirements. I'll try and get something there as well in that springtime. Salary survey is going to be a couple months, as well as merit pay. But we are meeting tomorrow morning. And then hopefully in June and July, we'll work on capital equipment plan. So hopefully we've got a better plan in terms of having our set aside a little bit better dispersed. And then we'll work on a policy for set aside fund, as well as your streets capital improvement plan, just so we have an idea of what projects are going to be done each year, your moderate sized projects. That's what's going forward. Any questions, anything else you need?
So we talked at one time about we hadn't raised taxes in a lot of years. But we talked at one time about maybe raising taxes as the cost of living raises. So I mean, we're only raising it, what, 2 cents?
If we do issue debt, say September, you would have to agree that a year from today, basically, to raise it about $1.
I was gonna suggest we chip away at that $16,000 with another half a cent increase. How much would that raise?
That's where it gets complicated. Certain funds can levy for certain things. I can't levy any more out of general fund. I'm at the max for general fund. So the only way I could cheat that system is by ballooning up liability or employee benefits. And I don't know if morally I should do that or not, put it that way. So that's kind of why there's the fee included in that. Otherwise, we could cut 16,000 from somewhere else and have it pay out of general fund. But that would be, if you didn't want to raise it, that would be your option. Or we just have a 10,000 to 16,000 deficit. You guys could choose to do that.
Solid waste.
Oh.
Figure out another way to.
Essentially, it's just been coming out of general fund. So that's part of the ways to make, with this challenging year, more even, and hopefully with all the state changes, at least having the general fund more sustainable would be trash paying for trash 100%.
So maybe that's a goal for next time, next couple of years.
Right now you have that.
What's up?
Trash paying for trash.
In this proposal, it's trash 100%, 100%. But you guys will have to vote on a policy. If you vote no, then your $6,000 surplus in general fund would be negative 10,000. So
Don't levy anymore.
no, $8.10 is the max from the state. So
Let me get this right. To break even, if we didn't raise taxes, we'd have to cut another 16,000. No,
10.
10,000.
We got a $6,000 surplus.
If you didn't want to raise the $1.05 per month or whatever to pay for that tipping fee. And that's a direction you can give me. I can tell you, I probably cut $200,000 off of this budget on the general fund and 120 off of streets.
Hold on, time out, because I'm not following.
Yep.
Are you, sounds like they're insinuating that the 2 cent tax rate increase was because of the $16,000 tipping.
It's not.
Related.
No,
Nope, it's not. It's for town hall. Town hall. But if you don't want to have a fee, that would be your option. Or you could not raise it for the town hall, and then you'll sit at a deficit again. So instead of having 40,000 next year, you'll have 30,000. And 3 years down the road, then the general fund will be subsidizing town hall.
that's Civic Center.
Yeah.
Correct. Civic Center, town hall. Yep.
I don't know what I'm thinking right now. So.
We got a whole 50 minutes.
No Monday Night Football.
Yeah, that's it.
So that's your, I guess that's my final direction. Do you want me to make changes to the levy? Do you want me to make changes with the, I guess, the fees on trash? I'd have to go back.
Our trash a year ago, just dramatically when we switched over. Another fee, and then- I don't know.
I feel like
Seems like we're keeping our taxes low, but we're increasing everything that it takes to live in this town. The water, the sewer, the trash, all that expenses added up. You know, taxes might not go up, but everything in this town is going up.
it's gotta be one or the
It's
other.
everywhere.
Does have to be one or the other.
Well,
We're
Like
still
Adam's
10 years
kinda said
behind
it-
all the other few cities around us, because they all came up with all those new fees and stuff 5-6 years ago.
like Adam's kind
So
of
we lag
enlightened
behind.
us. Is it's not so easy to just raise taxes. You gotta, you know, you have to prove where it's going. There's not just a
You can't just put-
levy because I want to
yeah,
levy,
you can't
you
just add
know?
$2 to it.
Yeah.
Say we're $15 now and give us
That's kind of what I was getting
$1
at.
million.
Let's just add 0.5% and then our garbage problem solved.
Why are we stuck at 810?
That's a state.
State law.
State law.
So they tell you, can't tax your people any more than this.
So if you grow.
So what do
Then
you-
we're gonna roll stuff out, all kinds of stuff out for you.
That was,
You gotta
that
pay
was
for.
gonna lead into my question is, have we thought about, not saying I need to know it now, but we keep adding all these new roads and new whatever. Have we ever sat down to figure out where these extra miles of road cost Matt and his guys to work?
That's gonna be part of the street plan we do,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what I was alluding to. I don't wanna say I don't support every single type of option of housing. But if we put too much eggs in our R1 basket, I feel like we're not gonna get enough revenue to maintain those roads and the water and sewer, because the further and further out people live, more infrastructure is needed. You don't necessarily get as much per dollar per square foot or acre as you would if there's, an apartment complex of 30 people sitting. You only need one small, it'll be a wider line, but it's one line. So I hope to do the math on that. I'm not saying we should never have R1, but I think we just need to be cognizant of that when you're talking lower density.
Well, we've got some high density projects coming on. I mean, we get bigger. Hopefully. we don't- So,
You add people and that covers it.
okay, anything else? Anyone? Yes, I'd
Pack more
take a
people in a
motion
small
to
spot,
adjourn.
Get more money per foot of the street.
So we're at 4:30. 4:30.
Is it?
We have a TIF meeting prior to.
Oh, right.
3:30, then 4:30 is the other meeting.
Jerry's looking through his notes.
Overall budget suggested,
We're done.
We're not too bad. We're not
No.
pretty, but we're not.
We have some tough
We're
questions.
not as
coming
tight as
up.
we
got
were.
some tough TIF questions coming up.
Yep.
2 or 3 developments.
And I'd say, yeah,
I meant from like a general budget.
general perspective, I think we took a huge step forward. You'll still probably, me looking at it as you as a council member, you'll probably get questioned on why fireworks might be shortened. You might get slack on why we're considering bracelets, you might get slack on, you know, why aren't we doing Old Men's League, or why do we have to pay? You might get slack on, why aren't we doing the walking program anymore? You might get slack on, why is the library asking for money and the fire department? And then we're doing it for hometown days. That's probably where you're gonna get slack. But we were hit by 5 things. And I think the rollback that we get $90,000 a year, then it'll be 80, 70, 60. We're all the way off. We're gonna use that for projects or for set aside. So we'll have a comfortable set aside. A couple other things we need to look at is, do we want trash to pay for trash? 100%. And then building permits, I'd like to, we're making good money, but that's subsidizing that $6,000 surplus. So it would be nice if we're making $30,000 in profit, put that in like a capital fund for trails or a third turn lane or whatever it is, because there's always an associated cost. So are we in a way better place? Yes. We still have some movement to go. I still have my questions on general fund and road use, but I would say we slowed down the bleeding versus just being all out bleeding with what took place this year. But is it small bleeding or not in road use and general fund? We'll know in the next year or two. But there are more state changes coming next year.
I don't think we knew we were bleeding till,
I was just gonna say, it
till you came on board.
feels awkward to sit here. I feel like I know everything, but at the same time, I feel like I'm missing a bunch of stuff.
So
Just from the previous 3 years, of basically sitting here and just going, I don't know what he's talking.
Yeah.
so
I
there's
feel better now.
there's bleeding
Sorry, I
on
was just throwing it out there.
on-
It's like uncomfortable, comfortable.
there's bleeding on that, and then there's bleeding the fact that we were paying when we were paying back the general fund for College Street and Second Street. We were using that money to subsidize the general fund. We weren't putting that to another project or set aside. So theoretically, instead of there being 250 to 300,000 in the general fund, we should probably be sitting at 600,000 if we would have been putting that all set aside. So that's easy to say because it's not like we were doing nothing with the money, but I think just before we take on new stuff or when we're paying something back, it shouldn't be used to pay for operation.
When did you start?
Oh,
November 30th.
yeah.
5 short months, he understands. I mean, I'm amazed. I really am. At the level of
Except
understanding.
in 60 days. I don't know where you're getting 5 months. We started in
November,
November
December,
30th.
January. Yeah,
January.
3 months. All right.
I
I'm
went
amazed
through
at it.
these 2,000 line items probably like 17 times or what, you know, that's part of it. And I hope to get out a little bit more. I know that was a big goal, but I think seeing everything in, calculating it, that kind of decided I need a little bit more attention budget wise, but
Motion to adjourn, anyone?
Move.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
But if you take